The cinema industry has gone through some extraordinary changes since its beginning over 100 years ago. And perhaps the best way of looking at such a big picture is to focus in on something a little smaller. What better way to start than looking at the UK's most remote cinema?
Lerwick, the bustling modern capital of the Shetland Islands. Shetland is situated 200 miles north of mainland UK, has a population of 23,000, and its main industries are oil, fishing and knitwear. Standing proudly on Lerwick's waterfront is Mario, the most northerly cinema in the UK. Completed in 2012 after extensive consultations with local musicians, performers and the public, it's a state-of-the-art entertainment facility housing 2 cinemas, a concert hall and exhibition spaces, and every year supplies over 3,000 film showings and 100 live events. But only one street away, and nearly 100 years earlier, another entertainment centre was opening its doors to the public. The North Star, or Picterhouse as it was commonly known, was built in 1913 by a group of mostly Shetland investors. The local paper stated,
"The North Star has been specially erected as a home for cinema, and is the first of its kind in the north of Scotland to be specially erected for such a purpose."
It immediately became popular in Lerwick. At that point there was a big population in Lerwick, but there was also a big transient population here because of the fisheries. So it was a place to go, it was a place to be entertained.
On its opening day, the North Star was well received and played 2 sell-out shows to capacity crowds of 750 people, sitting and standing. Several short films were shown to the public, among which was Britain's first chase movie, The Runaway Match, The Tenderfoot, Desert Sands, and several other short films. According to the Shetland Times,
"The day was rainy and boisterous, but despite this there was an excellent attendance, and the inside of the hall was cosy and highly attractive, being excellently lighted with electric lights. Indeed, everything is up to date within the building."
Until the 1930s, silent films were the mainstay of the entertainment on offer. Films often being accompanied by one of several local piano players. Newsreels were immensely important. Back then, there was no TV, no internet, and no real way to get a visual picture of what was happening while the world was at war.
Telegrams would be the fastest way to find things out in World War I, yeah. Apart from that, you had an extensive body of rumours and newspapers. There were 2 local newspapers, Shetland Times and Shetland News. That was it, really. News really still travelled at the speed of a ship.
Though the footage was hardly up to the minute, it still allowed Shetlanders a glimpse of the outside world and how the war was going. And newsreels continued to be shown right through both world wars and beyond. Shows in the 20s also consisted of short ornithological films made by one of the managers, as well as talent shows, musical variety acts, often local talent, but sometimes star turns, like the renowned Charlie Coburn, seen here singing the song which made his name.
Could hear the girls declare he must be a millionaire. Could hear them sigh and wish that I could see them wink the other eye at the man who broke the bank at Monte Carlo. And I walked and looked at my wife.
As time went by, technological progressions meant that sound could be added to films, and in February 1931, Shetlanders eagerly waited for their first ever experience of talking movies. They weren't disappointed, as Sunny Side Up wowed the crowd with this new marvel. Jackie McMillan was the projectionist that night.
The first picture, well, the first sound picture which I was Sunny Side Up, and there was a big queue for that. The queue was as far as the Lerwick Landry. It was a fine frosty night. The sky was clear.
The audience must have been spellbound by their very first experience of talking movies.
What are you getting for Swiss cheese?
50 cents a pound, madam.
50 cents? Why, across the street at Tannenbaum's it's only 35 cents.
Then why didn't you get it from him?
Because he hasn't got any.
Oh, now we go to the picture house, as we call it. I always used to go there on a Saturday. That was after we married. Because Sidney was keen on to go up to the throats. So he would take me to the first house of the pictures. And then he would get to the throats.
There was the inevitable occasional unwelcome visitor drifting in from the slaughterhouse across the road, which scared a few people, but those same folk would have been thankful not to be present when during World War II a herd of cows, on the way to meet their doom at the slaughterhouse, broke free and ran straight into the open doors of the North Star, stampeding straight through the cinema and out the exit, and all without leaving one single calling card. Saturday matinees were hugely popular among Shetlanders and attracted a fair amount of children, eager to see their heroes in action. Indeed, these proved to be a staple income for the North Star, right through to the 1970s.
For pretty boys in the 1940s, the most exciting time was Saturday afternoon with a matinee performance. There was cowboy films, Gene Autry, Roy Rogers, and Hopalong Cassidy and all that. There was always Indian fighting with Indians, and a lot of them followed almost the same pattern. There was a fort, and some wise old general was retiring, and then some young whippersnapper came out from somewhere to take over the fort. And where peace had been in the Indian camp, suddenly there was uproar. He would upset the Indians, and then of course the next thing you heard the boom, boom, boom with the war drums and smoke signals going up. And then of course the Indians began to come and attack the fort, and always at the last minute then you heard the bugle playing, and over the hill came the cavalry in full power. And then for the 8-penny seats in that picture house, a roar just went up that could have lifted the roof. It was all the penny boys blind at the meaning the fort was being saved.
Yes, there were a lot of serials on. They were good too. The Road Bairns, they enjoyed them.
Yeah.
The cheers would go up, and the cavalry came, and the cowboys got a cheer as well.
Right.
I mind watching a Roy Rogers movie in the North Star when I was a pretty lass. I just loved his horse Trigger, and I wanted him for myself. My elder sister, what was I playing tricks on me, well, sure told me that Trigger's stable was under the stage, and needless to say, I was off in the dark to fin him. I can mind finning a door down near the side fire escape. I opened it and was very disappointed to find no stable, but a very annoyed manager, and I kept asking him where Trigger was. I threw a tantrum at my big sister and we had to leave, or more than likely were told to leave.
Hard wooden seats, 7p, old money. And then you've got a softer one if you paid 9p. And if you went like on a Saturday night with your mum, you sat up at the back. And I think that was 1.9 in old money. So that was very, very cheap compared to nowadays when you're paying £6 to go to a pub. There was Laurel and Hardy, Mother Riley, that was a man, Mother Riley, not that we kent that at the time.
Always a splendorous sight at the cinema was the commissionaire, whose job it was to maintain order outside and inside the cinema.
Big brown coat, and she's got her hat with gold braid, and we had to queue to get in, and it was single file to the pay box every time you got up.
The commissionaire also shared another task, which Shetlanders remembered well. Many North Star cinema goers recall the ritual spraying of a chemical during intervals between films, where a member of staff would walk down the aisle, spraying the audience with a fine mist of what they assumed to be DDT or disinfectant, but which was in fact a specially produced cinema air freshener named Chromosol. This was used to mask the smell of stale cigarette smoke, smoking of course being permitted indoors at the time.
But it was like Zaflora spray, and you got covered in it.
Many things have changed since then, one of them being dress code.
Everybody dressed up for every occasion. Older clothes, you wouldn't put on your best clothes to go to the picture house, but you went to the picture house well dressed. And sadly, the code of dress has fallen so much now. Folk used to go better dressed to the pit hill.
In 1944, the North Star was acquired by J.B. Milne, an entrepreneur from Dundee who owned a large chain of Scottish cinemas. He was a skilled violinist and a musical director, and did a lot to institute good quality cinema throughout Scotland, and shortly after, the splendour of widescreen cinemascope arrived in Shetland. This was a much more impressive format. For the overworked projectionist, it meant changing the lens and masking the screen with a set of specially made curtains. The effect was overwhelming. Alistair Smith has run R.W. Bay's shop in the centre of Lerwick for 30 years. Alistair began his working life at the North Star as a trainee projectionist in 1957, and during his career worked as manager of a multitude of J.B. Milne's cinemas throughout Scotland, among them the North Star.
It was a bit daunting, somebody coming from the country and never been in any place like that except to see a film. It was very labour intensive work. First thing I did was to come in and change the category board, which was above the cash desk on the wall. This is to show the category of the film and the title and the time it was on. Once we got that done, then the big job of the day was to light the furniture. It was way done next to what we call the engine room, and we had generators down there for the arc lamp. But then once that was done, we used to have to clean the projectors.
Modern-day digital cinemas are supplied with films sent on hard drives, or even by satellite signal. For them, the film reel no longer exists. Many shows are pre-programmed on computer and run automatically, with next to no contact between the projectionist and the projector. To fully appreciate a real projectionist's skills, you have to know how a classic projector worked.
Motion pictures are just still pictures joined together on a long strip of film. The more still pictures we get while the action is going on, the smoother it looks. Now we'll build a projection machine to show the pictures on a screen. The film unwinds from the reel and rewinds onto another reel after it runs through the projector. To throw the picture on the screen, there is a bright light with a reflector behind it to send the light rays in the right direction, and a lens to concentrate the light. The film passes a hole or aperture which lets the light go through only one picture at a time. There is another lens to focus the pictures on the screen. By adjusting the lenses, the picture can be made sharp and clear. Let's start the machine moving. The still pictures blur because they're moving all the time. And this won't do at all. We need something to hold each picture still long enough for us to look at it in between the changes. When the film is started and stopped in rapid succession, the eye sees the changes being made, and the result is streaks instead of movies. So we need a shutter to cut off the light while every change of picture is being made, and let light through only while the film is standing still. Surprising as it seems, you never see a motion picture while it is actually moving. The only time a movie moves is when the shutter keeps you from seeing the change of picture. Then we see it just the way it looks in real life.
From its opening, the North Star had 2 Cayley 8 projectors, initially run by men like Jock Sutherland and Jackie Macmillan. Jock starting in the North Star as a chocolate boy when the cinema first opened. 2 projectors were needed because the film reels held between 10 and 20 minutes worth of film, so feature films were shown in sections. While one projector was running the first 20 minutes, the other would be laced up and prepared for action. When the time came, the projectionist would switch over from one to the other, often so smoothly the audience wouldn't notice. Then the process would begin again, until all the film's reels had been shown. There was little time for the projectionist to rest. Lacing up a projector was a skill in itself, as you can see from this film, of a relatively modern 35mm projector. All the tensions had to be precise and the film sitting correctly in order to run smoothly. Light was produced in the lamp housing by passing an electrical charge through 2 copper-coated carbon rods. If the rods were the correct distance apart, a plasma ball would be formed, which gave out an extremely intense light supply, rather like that of a welder's torch. The rods would burn down, as the film showed, and had to be monitored constantly in order to maintain the correct distance between them. Too close together, and the film would show brown. Too far apart, and the film would show blue. Any further apart, and the lamp would go out, and heaven help the projectionist. Each set of rods burnt for approximately 1 hour, and created quite an amount of fumes, which had to be ventilated, and also a large quantity of ash, which meant constant trips to the Essie bin. 2 vastly improved, peerless Magnarch lamp housings were added by Alistair Smith in later years, but the projector mechanisms were the originals throughout the life of the North Star. These photographs of a similar projection room in Leeds show what conditions were like for the projectionist. The sound initially came from vinyl records, which were played in sync with the film, a potentially hazardous process, as the discs had often seen a fair amount of use in other cinemas before they reached the North Star. The films sometimes arrived in poor shape too, and they'd have to be carefully repaired and any missing pieces patched in to ensure the picture was still in sync with the sound from the record, as Jackie Macmillan related.
You had to set in what was cut out, yes. And some of the operators, so if it broke, they just cut the piece out and joined up. Naturally, when you had to play the thing through, then the sun was out of pot.
Later on, sound was incorporated into the film reels themselves, which made the projectionist's task much easier. Neil Odie was projectionist in the North Star from 1957. He remembered that sometimes the sound still wasn't without the occasional mishap.
Some of the B films was absolutely cracking. They're good little films. They're usually detective films. And I mind one particular one, there was it started off and a gun appeared out of the left-hand side of the screen and gradually crept out. And there was no sound on this when this happened. And when the gun came out, you seen the finger tightening and the trick and bang. That was the murder being committed. Now the rest of the film was finding out who did it and why he did it, and all this kind of thing. But old Jock Sutherland, the projectionist, he'd been off the first night it was shown and he was a bit deaf. So when this came on and there were no sound on it, I could see he was worrying, he was keep screwing up the volume, and I was shouting at him, "There's no sound on it, Jock, there's no sound on it." And he thought I was meaning there were no sound. So to my alarm, he was winding up all this volume controls. And then he get to the big amplifier, and I seen him putting up the volume on that too. And all of a sudden, the gun fired. Honest to God, it just went off like a cannon. Folk reeled in the seats. I swore dust fell out of the roof. And if the front door had been open, you'd had it in Bresa. It was colossal. And Jock started grinning and said, "He had that one," he said.
Bang! He would have had it in Bresa. Yes, yes.
Promotional materials were fairly limited in those days, such as newspaper ads and posters, seen here below Fort Charlotte, so many cinemas devised their own advertising methods. The North Star was no exception. Managers often fashioned their own advertisements from whatever materials were available. The results often very effective. This cardboard biplane was built by Alistair Smith to advertise the Blue Max. Several of the North Star's managers excelled at this form of promotion, but perhaps Steve Kogel took the biscuit in order to promote the 1968 war classic Where Eagles Dare. A German officer's uniform was sent from head office, which Steve promptly donned, and goose-stepped his way aboard a Russian Navy ship which was in port at the time, handing out leaflets along the way, much to the confusion of the poor Cold War-affected sailors. The campaign obviously worked, as several Russian sailors attended the film, but firmly requested there be no incriminating photographs of their visit to the Western cinema. Steve may have taken the biscuit, but manager Alex Gregg took the cake when in 1961 he commissioned Shetland art teacher Charlie Forrett to produce a homegrown version of the poster for the film Conga. Charlie, under the alias of Pinto Ferretto, painstakingly changed the original poster showing a ravaged London to that of a ravaged Lerwick. You'd like to think that Charlie was smiling from above when his work was honoured over 50 years later by a local litter campaign involving another monster. Shetland cinema goers had their own idiosyncrasies. Alistair told of a nightly event which was guaranteed to have the audience vacate the building quicker than a fire alarm.
Then of course we had the Queen trailer which we used at the end.
What's that?
The Queen. They're a real, you see, we just the God Save the Queen on it. And picture of the Queen on horseback. Because usually, once the end came on, everybody made a quick exit before the Queen, so they didn't have to stand and wait.
Usherettes too throughout the years had their work cut out for them, selling tickets, serving ice cream and refreshments, quelling the masses, and doing their best to ensure general peace and calm.
Sometimes on a Sunday night we would get a lot of youngsters in. I hesitate to say a lot of the ones from Borough, which is nothing against them. They were really great fun, but there just seemed to be so many of them. And they would try and sneak in their carryouts with their beer. And it was just in the beginning of ring pull days, and they would try to cough to mask the sound of the ring pull being pulled. So you would be always aware of this coughing and hear the click. And of course alcohol wasn't allowed in there, and you were supposed to try and no mark them do it, but kind of difficult to police. It was an easier one to let go, really. They weren't doing any harm.
For a young usherette, the North Star would have been a daunting building to be walking around late at night after the evening's films had ended. Jasmine Davis told of a strange experience she and her cousin had while locking up at the end of the night.
There was always stories about it being haunted, but I never really experienced anything except for one night. It was Alistair Smith's night off, and the standard procedure was that at the end of the film, I would do all his paperwork, and my cousin Caroline Tulloch would do my paperwork, and we would lock up and leave. I started to hear something upstairs in the balcony. It was like somebody walking around, but I didn't say anything because I didn't want to spook my cousin. A few minutes later, she turned round and said to me that she could hear somebody in the balcony. As we had just come past the bottom of the stairs, we could hear footsteps coming down the stairs. There was nobody there, we couldn't see anything, but these footsteps just were coming directly towards us, and we were just standing there, absolutely terrified to move. Whatever it was, it walked past us, and at that moment, we could have been in the Arctic. It was absolutely freezing. Don't know what it was, but there was definitely a presence there.
In the spring of 1964, television arrived. Black and white, and only one channel, but it was enough to draw audiences away from the cinema. In an attempt to counter this, J.B. Milne introduced bingo to the North Star, with cash prizes. In his letter to Shetland Council of Social Service, he wrote,
"With the advent of television on the island, it is not possible for this cinema to continue without the assistance of a bingo club, and my remarks in my letter to the Town Council finalise the matter, pending their decision."
When Kingsway Entertainments took over in 1968, they introduced prize bingo, a supercharged version of bingo with instant prizes where the lucky winner could take their pick from an array of quality items displayed on the stage. They also introduced gaming machines, which proved extremely popular. In 1974, colour TV arrived, and with it, a second channel in the shape of ITV. Again, changes would have to be made to keep people coming through the doors.
I think how cinema kept ahead was to show things you couldn't see in your home. And that meant certain colour film for a start, and quite well-defined colour film on a large screen, various techniques like cinemascope and the like, and later on, as this became allowed in society, naked people.
In 1978, Charles Fordyce acquired the North Star. As well as showing a steady stream of the latest films, he began to cater for wider tastes and introduced film showings of recorded country music shows and rock concerts. He also began booking some big-name entertainers from the country and western world, among whom were Kitty Wells and George Hamilton IV.
The late 1970s, a lot of acts were being brought up because you could actually tour them, because you had Lerwick itself and perhaps various parts of the country, and also Sullom Voe workforce as a kind of captive audience. It was the great era of certain sorts of country and western acts. You got the British country and western acts, and some acts from North America that you'd probably never heard of. Like Charlie Pride's brother played Shetland at one point.
Indeed, many showbiz names visited the North Star over this period, such as Marty Wilde, the Corries, Mud, Sidney Devine, Keith Harris, and Alvin Stardust. These concerts struck the right note with the Shetland audience, and also with a large population of oil workers drafted in to work on the new Sullom Voe oil terminal, with many of the showings to capacity audiences.
I mind when Alvin Stardust played there. There was a lass in my class at school the next day hid the tomb off his leather glyph.
Video recorders had been around since the 70s, but had been prohibitively expensive. This all changed in 1979 when prices dropped due to the availability of new formats. This meant that many people could now enjoy a choice of movies in their own homes. This had an obvious knock-on effect on the cinema and brought the North Star close to bankruptcy. Many distributors were no longer keen to send mainstream films to Shetland, so the films on offer became a very mixed bag. In the early 80s, disco found a home in the North Star. The stalls, or scratchers, were removed and a wooden dance floor fitted, along with a dazzling array of disco lights. Instead of the stalls, stackable chairs were used when films were shown. By 1985, no home was complete without a video recorder and an extensive range of films. This was the final nail in the coffin for the cinema as it stood in Shetland, and in January 1990, the North Star showed its last film. What was your last night like?
Well, my last night was kind of sideways. You can't go and switch everything off. You can't. Probably will never start again.
Concentrating more on live events, the North Star revved up its engines again with concerts, stage shows and bands from near and far.
As a venue itself, there was lots of things lacking, but as far as like sightlines, atmosphere, sound, everything was great. Bands used to love playing there. I don't know, feeling it was similar to like the Barrowlands or whatever in Glasgow, in that it was, okay, it wasn't posh, it wasn't clean, never mind posh, but it was very, very laid back. The crowds were always up for it.
Nationally, the rave scene was picking up pace, and locally, the North Star seemed the perfect venue to take advantage of this new dance movement.
We started getting big names like Andy Pemberton, Martin Pickard, and the big one that we managed, there was a big coup for us, was getting Sister Bliss. She brought with her a white label record, which a white label is just a plain looking 12-inch record, no writing on it. And she said, I play in a band and we're releasing this song next week. We've got a record deal and I'm going to play it tonight. And this is going to be one of the first places it's ever played. And she played this song called Insomnia, which ended up a massive hit all over the world. And every club in from one end of the world to the other, Insomnia was playing, and the rest is history. And that night, that was the end of the balcony in the North Star that night, because there was so many people jumping and dancing to this particular song. The balcony literally started moving, and from that day on, the balcony was condemned. It was never used again because the Sister Bliss night knackered it.
Because DJs travelled light and were much easier to book than bands, the North Star was able to book several big names on the dance circuit, many of whom were warmed by the homely atmosphere which they hadn't experienced down south.
I remember them distinctly, a few of them, including Sister Bliss, saying to us that she had never been in a place like this, never DJed in a place like this. She's DJed in bigger and smaller, but the atmosphere in the North Star and in Shetland people in general was fantastic because it was like a big party at your house. Everybody knew everybody. She didn't need minders. She could go to the bar and get a drink. She could walk around and speak to people, dance.
It was great because you knew everybody. In your other years when you went south and you went to a nightclub, you nearly felt a bit lost after being somewhere like the North Star because you went in and everybody you kent was there. It was a big party.
It was great getting Lixirik Witter. He came on stage right at the start of the night and played Shade 7 songs with local musicians. Just 2 or 3 songs right at the start. Manny did the same with Stone Roses tracks. He got just a few locals got up and played. That, I don't think that would happen anywhere else, but up here and in the North Star. As far as I can remember, everybody that came here just absolutely loved it. It was something a bit special.
Sadly, after years of service, the building was showing its age. The balcony had been condemned and trade had fallen again. This was too much for the venue to recover from, and in 2011, the decision was made to demolish the building. The North Star's final concert, much like its first performance back in 1913, was very well attended. It may not have been the comfiest cinema in Britain, or the most luxurious, but for nearly a century, It entertained, informed, and enthralled generations of islanders. And even though it's long gone, the Picture House still holds a special place in the heart of many a Shetlander.